It's bill signing season and Governor Rauner has been on the trail. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. With me here today is someone who is sometimes in this chair, but luckily we have him helping out today in the reporter role. Bruce Rushton, reporter with Illinois Times. Thanks for coming back, Bruce.
No, thanks for having me.
And Rachel Droze is here, her first voyage on the show. Thanks for coming. She is State House reporter for WICS News Channel 20 in Springfield. Rachel, thank you.
Of course, I'm happy to be here.
Sounds good. And so the governor signed some bills this last week, and I'll start with Rachel because I know that you have covered this extensively. Talking about guns, you can now, under this new law, there'll be orders of protection to keep guns from dangerous people. There will be a 72-hour waiting period for long guns as well as pistols, which is already the case in Illinois. How did it roll out, and are people happy about it?
Well, there's obviously mixed reviews from the pro-Second Amendment people saying that any regulation is too much regulation against what the forefathers wanted for Americans. But Rauner says that he's not going to be signing any bills that impede on the Second Amendment. So kind of goes against what some of them are saying, that he's saying these red flag bills and the 72-hour wait period does not infringe on anyone's Second Amendment rights, that it just keeps them safe. And he did say no to the other bill, the gun dealer regulation.
Right.
So he said that he will.
And then, that was one. Don Harmon is the state senator from Oak Park. He was the main sponsor of that. He wanted the state, his argument, or the argument of people who passed that bill and sent it to the governor, or I guess it's being held up and maybe it's not sent to him quite yet, but are saying that federal regulations are not necessarily being carried out because there's not enough agents in the federal government to go around to all the gun shops, so we need better state regulation. But the governor, says there was too much regulation in a bill he vetoed, and then they reworked it and said that they took a lot of the red tape out, but the governor clearly indicated by his comments that he still thinks that's the case.
I mean, my sense of it was this was not so much a Second Amendment issue as a regulatory issue, that these sorts of things were onerous on small businesses, and that the larger stores, the Shields, the Walmarts, these big box stores would not suffer nearly as much, if at all.
Well, that was certainly under the first iteration
under the
of
first
the bill.
one. So it comes around, and it's perfected, at least in the eyes of the proponents of it, still not enough. And so I'm not. It still seems to me more of a business thing, because I mean the goal here, Harmon's goal here, was to try to do stuff like, and we have this experience in Springfield where we've had a couple of gun shop burglaries. On the face may have been preventable, and this sort of thing may have been a mechanism to allow stricter regulations to at least ensure that things are kept more safe than current regulations require. And there are a couple of states that have done that. I think Minnesota is one. I think there's Massachusetts has done something similar where they have at least some state mechanism. But this was a no, and I don't think that I mean, certainly for the pro-Second Amendment folks, it could have been a lot worse. There was bills on the size of clips, for example. There was something to limit it to, I think, 30 clips or 15. I don't remember.
Bullets per.
Yeah, exactly. Rounds, exactly, magazine size. That kind of stuff went down, and so what you're left with is stuff that I think, by and large, mainstream folks would agree with, which is the red flag thing, and that was an outgrowth, I think, of the tragedy in Waffle.
They call it red flag, of course, saying
if
there's red flags and you see somebody.
Well, that was the Waffle House shooting,
right.
Like that.
And it also is about, if you think a family member might harm themselves, or if they're talking about suicide, and then you can go to court and say, hey, this person shouldn't be able to have guns, take them, which is still, but the governor did sign that.
They signed that, and all along, I think that the folks that are on, if you want to call it the pro-Second Amendment side, have been saying, well, we need to examine more mental health issues than just more restrictions on guns, and so that goes, I think, along down that avenue of we see a problem with somebody, let's do something about it.
Yeah, in at least one or two of his stops, the governor he wants a bill that would allow local school districts to issue a tax, or perhaps there would be local referenda for tax to pay for school resource officers. He stopped in Dixon, where there was an officer who stopped a shooting, but that bill is far from, moving at this point. The governor even mentioned at one point a special session, or was thinking about it, but nothing seems to be developing in that way. He still has a legislature that's of the other party than he's Republican, the legislature's Democratic. And there's no scheduled meetings of the legislature until after the election, when the veto session comes. So we'll see. And he's also still talking about, he's criticizing legislators for not passing the death penalty, which is interesting because death penalty was abolished in Illinois several years ago after a number of people who were on death row were found to be innocent, were exonerated, were let out of death row. Big sea change in Illinois. And then 2 weeks before the end of the legislative session this year, the governor used an amendatory veto to say, in cases, which is legally questionable, I think, of absolute certainty that someone is
Not
guilty.
just questionable, unprecedented.
And if you kill a police officer or a number of people, a mass killing, that there should be the death penalty. So he's using that to attack the legislature. I don't know how fair that is.
It's not fair at all. I mean, what that is beyond all doubt. I'm not going to do just reasonable doubt, but beyond all doubt. Well, go talk to God on that one, because that's the only entity that we know of.
Because mental state is often part of the defense, and you can't, so what is that?
Yeah. So the beyond all doubt, that was a shiny balloon intended for the base or the campaign. That had no reasonable way of going forward that I could see, at least. And I believe the States Attorneys Association, states attorneys did raise concerns saying,
they did.
Beyond all doubt? Huh?
Interesting, John Milheiser was or is the president of that Sangamon County State's
Correct.
Attorney, and they issued a letter saying, we don't think the standard is reasonable.
Sure, it was a standard that unprecedented in American jurisprudence, so far as we know. So
we'll see. Well, moving along, the governor also has clearly a campaign issue, as J.B. Pritzker takes him on and talks about deaths from Legionnaire's disease at the Quincy Veterans Home. Legislators from both sides of the aisle have been working to do something together, and they did. And the governor, in his office in Springfield at the State House this last week, signed a couple of bills which would allow some move forward on the Quincy Veterans Home situation, where there has been that problem with the water system. Rachel?
Yeah, but the question is, why did it take this long to get this far, and there's still ways to go before this facility can even be rebuilt? They've sat on it, they've researched, they've heard from the feds, they've heard from the state, they went through a new director, and now they're finally starting to move forward. And what does this bill? What does it do? It cuts red tape.
Yeah, well, one thing is that it allows them, it puts under, I guess, the Department of Veterans Affairs a abandoned or an empty, a vacant nursing home in the area, so that they can rehab that, take it over, have the state move people from the Quincy Veterans Home into there. Then it's, it's tens of millions of dollars to build a new building or get started on a new building. And it's also, I believe that this legislation, in the cut red tape way, it says that the same firm can design and build instead of having to have different firms design it and build it, so that things will run smoother and it will take less time, even though it's still probably a matter of more than a year to get something built to replace what's there now, to replace a building so that they can get rid of the Legionnaire's disease in the more than 100-year-old pipes under the existing building.
And it does, in the terms of cutting red tape, allow them to more quickly apply for these federal funds that will help pay these millions of dollars that are going to be coming into the bankrupt state.
Yeah. To your point as to why it took so long, I think that we can all credit WBEZ radio for the
public radio in
public
Chicago.
Radio for Chicago.
Yeah.
They put this issue on the forefront, and likely that nothing would have happened absent that coverage. That said, politically, I think this is a draw, and part of the reason I say that is that Rauner can rightfully say, this is unprecedented, insofar as we know that Legionnaire's disease has ever existed in the United States to the extent it did in this facility. Nobody knew back when this started how big of an issue this was. It only dawned on us, except for WBEZ. Right. So you've got that, but he's also got that quote-unquote weapon of the unfinished veterans home, which he can claim as a boondoggle.
Which is in Oak Park, Illinois, in the Chicago area.
Millions of dollars spent, wasteful, and frankly, his predecessor doesn't look good in terms of how.
And I don't know all the details on that one. I know that it sits unfinished, and I believe he stopped the work on it in 2015 when he was the new governor. So and did claim at the press conference we were at that a lot of that work is either down the drain or you have to start over. I'm not exactly sure, where that sits, but
Yeah. It seemed like a fight that both sides were willing to settle peaceably and move forward, which is a good thing.
yeah. And one thing that we learned from WBEZ is that, I think it's 11 families of the 13 people who have passed away at the Quincy home, veterans and spouses, had gone to sue the state and through the Court of Claims, which is the way to sue the state. And another thing that happened, there is a limit on what you can get from the state right now of $100,000, and legislation passed to increase that, I believe, to $2 million. And I think the governor has not yet said if he's going to sign that. So,
and I don't, frankly, I'm at a disadvantage here. I'm not sure of all the details of that one. But the issue of the Court of Claims and the limits has been an issue for a long time before Quincy ever came along.
Because a lot of that is just old law.
It's
based
old
on
law,
old,
and
amounts.
there are very righteous cases in the Court of Claims, and I can recall one specifically without going into too many details, but a woman who was raped at McFarland Mental Health Center, and they knew that she was in danger. They did nothing to protect her, and she couldn't get any justice because she couldn't sue the state in anything other than the Court of Claims, and ultimately committed suicide while it was going. It was a very tragic tale, but her case.
This is a long time ago.
A long time ago, but what I'm saying is that these sorts of issues come along periodically where you see that, geez, somebody really got screwed, because of what the state did, and they're limited. And so it would be nice to see, something more expansive than just the veterans home, but we'll have to see.
Well, we know from what we hear on the campaign trail, all candidates like veterans and are trying to do the best thing for them. So,
crazy people in McFarland's or mentally ill people don't get the same
Yeah.
attention that veterans get.
Well, luckily we haven't had outbreaks of Legionella at those facilities, so we'll go forward. During a series of press conferences that he had this week, the governor was asked about President Trump and President Trump's meeting with Russian President Putin in Helsinki, Finland, when the president, at least at that time, and there have been kind of differing stories coming out of the White House during the week. Does the president believe that Russia, as the United States intelligence agencies say, invaded or tried to affect our election in 2016, including hacking of states' boards of elections, including the Illinois one, where no votes were changed and no records were taken, but apparently records, hundreds of thousands, either somewhere between 76,000 that the state board has said and 500,000 that a federal indictment said records were looked at. So who does President Trump believe? The agencies that say Russia did it, or Putin?
What time is it?
and Trump initially said, President Putin denied it strongly, and then it's been back and forth on that. But the governor, who often hasn't said President Trump's name much, Governor Rauner, said that he was deeply troubled by President Trump's comments there, that Putin is a brutal dictator, and that there is overwhelming evidence that Russia was behind hacking of Illinois and other election systems. So, Rachel, the governor I guess he is always balancing, do I show that I'm with Trump or against him, or stay neutral, which I think he likes to do on federal issues, so he doesn't offend either part of the base that he needs. In this case, he came down basically saying the president was wrong.
He did, but I believe there was a follow-up question. I don't know if it was at that first press conference or the second one, of his feelings about President Trump's agenda, and he basically said, I agree with some of it, I don't agree with all of it, but he is doing good with some things. I don't know if that was yesterday or the day before. It was sometime this week.
I think it was about tariffs, and I might have asked it myself.
Yeah,
but yes,
I believe so.
And he
now
said,
that
I don't want to, I said you believe in his handling of foreign policy.
Yeah.
He said, I can't give an overarching answer to that, but tariffs we have to watch what we're doing with tariffs.
Right, so he's straddling the line of accepting President Trump as being a Republican and lining up with him or not, because it's a political season, it's an election year, and it's a very divisive season and time in America right now.
And Illinois went for Hillary Clinton, despite everything, although there are parts of the state that went strongly for Trump. So when you're down, the problem is for a candidate, whenever you talk in one place, everybody else can now hear you through the means of radio and other electronic
Exactly.
wizardry.
But Rauner's just parroting or mirroring what other Republicans are doing with Trump. And when Trump goes too far, and there's been two recent examples of that. One with the Putin stuff. There's nobody who is saying, "Gosh, that was a great thing." Even Trump's. The latest media reports we're hearing is on the plane back to the United States. They were already on damage control. Well, how are we going to explain this one? And the other one
He
was
misspoke. He said a word wrong. He said.
well, if you listen to the whole thing,
Yeah.
it sounded like more than one word was wrong, but that's okay. The other one was the separation of families at the border, and that also, I believe Rauner did say something.
He did.
Yeah.
He said that it was a bad policy and should be
Sure,
changed.
and that's what other Republicans have said. And so, but we also have the Rauner Pence. Where was that out?
It was in Rosemont.
Rosemont.
Yeah,
there was an event, and it was Pence, Vice President Mike Pence is going around the country, and he's also in Effingham late in this week. As we tape the show, it'll be later. But so you might have heard of it by now.
But,
But Rauner introduced him, and it was about the economy. And Rauner said the parts of the tax cuts are, we got a booming economy. Thank you to President Trump and his policies, which is again odd for the governor because for a long time he didn't mention the name of Trump.
Sure, that is odd. That is progress to quote unquote to some extent. And he starts doing that sort of thing when the polling shows, 90% of Republicans are support the president. And so it's been a cautious approach. And I don't know that Rauner's any different than anybody else to some extent. He's not going to go and full-throatedly denounce the president of the United States. He's going to pick his spots, and he's done.
Picked a spot.
He picked a spot, but it had all the political risk of kissing a baby. There really wasn't. There was no downside to saying you shouldn't hug dictators. So
Interesting. Rachel, you come from one of those TV stations that gets some money from television ads in campaign season. I'm not saying that affects what you do.
we're just jealous.
Public TV. You're not going to see those ads here, but so. We learned from some campaign finance spending reports this last week that in the last quarter that ended June 30th, Pritzker, if I've got these numbers right, spent $20 million, Rauner $7.8 million. We know, I'll just mention what it was in some of the ads. Bruce Rauner put out an ad, just call Madigan. It's making fun of just call Saul. Madigan, if he's your lawyer, he can get your taxes lowered. Look what Pritzker did. There's another one that's, I don't know if you would call it over the top. I might, because Mike Madigan may not be a liked person after tens of millions of dollars of what Bruce Rauner has advertised about him. But there's a Rauner campaign ad calling Madigan the most corrupt career politician in all America. Given the fact that he's not been charged with anything, that seems over the top. But then he links him with J.B. Pritzker. On the other side, Pritzker was running an ad. In addition, Pritzker's running some positive ads. J.B. Pritzker, the Democratic candidate for governor. Talking about job training and also things like early childhood education. But he also has one running that there's $1 billion. What did Bruce Rauner get for $1 billion in late payment penalties during his 2-year budget crisis? Nothing. So you've got that. Rachel, do you think these ads they're very early? Are they going to have the effect desired? And will voters just say, oh no, I don't want to vote in this election?
Well, that's the $1 million question, but I believe the saying goes, no news or any news is good news. So, you can be running these negative ads and people are going to then notice that person that's in that ad and maybe subconsciously make a connection that they don't realize. But at the same time, you run the risk with the negative ads of, well, who's behind that negative ad? Who wrote this negative ad? It can go both ways.
Yeah. Either one of you can comment. Like I say, Pritzker, who is richer than Rauner, because Pritzker is worth about $3.5 billion. Rauner is worth, depending on the day, I think in the $1 billion range. But each have spent lavishly in this campaign. Pritzker more. I might have missed it. I haven't seen a lot of positive Rauner ads, maybe some stuff online, but they're mostly attacking Pritzker and trying to put him in a box. So I don't know at what point. Rauner was going to have to get positive as well to say why I'd vote for him. Yeah.
At some point it does have to make some sort of, here's what I stand for, here's who I am, here's what I've done. Way too early for that right now, I think.
And also, he's the governor, the acting governor right now. He is in office, and some of the coverage that he gets just day by day of going to these places that you cover because it's the governor, not in his campaign role,
Right.
Does that count as
It does. Well, he
positive
gets a lot of
coverage?
free media. You're right.
Yeah.
So
Well,
when he signs a bill to say we're rebuilding Quincy Veterans Home, that's certainly positive, and that's the kind of thing that he's doing every day now.
He's made 2 recent trips to Washington, D.C., one for the Janus decision. Today he's there to accept the award for the National Black Chamber of Commerce, some sort of lifetime achievement award.
Right, for procurement rules.
Some sort of procurement rule.
Right.
And those, the photo ops are what's important, for that sort of thing. Now, it may be official business. We're certainly going to see it in the campaign. And so, the Janus journey, that was clearly a campaign.
Right. Well, he also met with Mike Pence and talked about businessy things and tax things. But yeah, it was clearly he wanted to be in Washington when the decision came down, and the Janus case, and most people watching the show probably know it anyway, is about labor unions saying you don't have to pay fair share. You don't have to join a union if you're a government worker, and you don't have to pay any dues at all or any fees at all if you don't want to join. And that's what Mark Janus of Springfield and Bruce Rauner have thought is the right thing to do. Mark Janus being a state worker that was recruited as part of this effort.
And today, it's, look, black business leaders love me. Because I've done great
And there will
things.
be nice pictures.
Yeah.
J.B. Pritzker has been running a Blue Wave campaign. He has funded his entire governor campaign by himself, but he has started accepting donations as part of an effort through his campaign to give to Democrats all over, up and down the ballot, more money to run, to be competitive. And Bruce Rauner has given lots of money, millions and tens of millions over the last 4 years to the Republican Party of Illinois and to other candidates. Hasn't, in recent disclosures, started giving that much this year. Bruce, is he going to step up, you think, and bring out the Rauner checkbook and help the Republicans compete on an even level with the Democrats now that they have this benefactor in Pritzker?
I think so. I mean, I think Rauner may be waiting to see what Pritzker does or doesn't do. Certainly, Rauner is going to punish the legislators who went against him on budget issues. That's going to happen. But yeah, Rauner will pull out his checkbook. He'd be presuming he wins. It's not going to be any easier for him if whatever Republicans end up in the House and Senate don't have him to thank for them being there. So if I'm a betting man, he's going to pull out that checkbook. It's mid-July. They're not going to really start needing that money till sometime after Labor Day.
Okay. I didn't ask before the show, but were either of you at the opening of the executive or the new governor's mansion?
I missed it,
You
but I watched it.
Missed it. Okay, I've seen. But we've all seen it on TV.
I watched it.
And our paper had a lot of nice pictures. Your TV station had a lot of nice pictures.
It was a little hot that day.
It was hot that day. There were some demonstrations, attacking governor for child care cuts or something off to the side. But the governor, with private money, and more than a year, I think, when the mansion was closed, he and his wife Diana raised like $15 million, got the mansion fixed, really cleared out the brush, made the entrance now looking north, this majestic thing. So does that politically help them as well? It's now open afternoons, I think most days. People, obviously you can check. And he did change the name by executive order from Executive Mansion to Governor's Mansion, because that's what everybody calls it, he said. So he's done a nice thing for Springfield. Now, you could say it was interesting during the budget impasse. The State Museum was closed down for almost a year, but then reopened with a fee to get in. Now the Governor's Mansion is kind of a museum itself, and I believe these tours are free, and it's open. So,
the fact I think that J.B. Pritzker helped pay for it kind of
negates.
That's
true too. He was one of the donors.
Yeah, well, I think he and the governor may have been the 2 largest donors, but they were certainly 2 of the heavyweights there. So Pritzker cannot attack Rauner for doing that, and vice versa. If you had a more populist person, say Daniel Biss, come in, then the governor would have some answering to do. I found it kind of interesting that they waited as long as they did to finally say, okay, here's who paid for this. And I don't know why it took as long as they did, because there were no Machiavellian horrible characters on the list of folks who actually paid for it. So, and that had been a question in a lot of folks' mind, I think, is for however many years this had been under construction, nobody knows who was footing the bill. So it was good that they put that forward. But a good thing for Springfield. There's
it's another place for tourists to go.
It's another place for tourists. It's another place for tourists to go. Beautiful house. You can't criticize somebody opening their checkbook and paying for something that had gone unaddressed for as long as it did and was crumbling to the fashion that it did. So,
And it sounded real bad.
And a lot of times, first ladies want to leave their mark on their husbands or first husbands in certain cases, want to leave their mark on their spouse's time in office. And could this have just been Diana wanting to do something that she can go to sleep at night and say, this is a project that I did for the people?
Well, she is a very accomplished person in her own right, and I think the fact that there was water in the basement and the elevator didn't work and all kinds of stuff when they got to
the elevator doesn't work in my house.
Well, there you go.
Okay.
But I also think it was a matter of necessity. But what's funny is I think that Pat Quinn, the previous governor, didn't have the state spend money on the mansion because he didn't want to get criticized for it.
Well, he was, and that is interesting.
And
because
so that's one reason that it had, I mean, it was in disrepair for a while, but then I think it fell in greater disrepair because Pat Quinn was scared of the political implications of spending state
it
money.
was
on
when the
building.
doors came out at the Capitol, and that was criticism. I mean, I think that helped. That sort of thing helped play a role. But yeah, that was the mansion was supposed to get done, and it just got put off.
Yeah. Well, one other thing that affects Illinois and Springfield, Randy Dunn has been the president for some years of Southern Illinois University, but is now out. There was a controversy that particularly people on the Carbondale campus thought he was being too nice financially, trying to move some money to the Edwardsville campus, which has been gaining students. Carbondale's been losing students. So he took a buyout and is leaving. Kevin Dorsey, who is was emeritus dean and provost of the SIU School of Medicine, is on as acting president. So another link to SIU. Rachel, have you ever dealt with any of?
I haven't spoken with any of them. I have been following this story, I'm sure, like everyone in Illinois, very closely, just because it's so interesting to have one of the major universities have such, I guess, inner struggles of funding, and I mean, it all goes back to funding in Illinois, I feel like, to be honest.
And the two-year budget impasse hurt universities some of the most. We're going to have to stop it there. Bruce Rushton and Rachel Droze, thanks for your input. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.